This is 2006's Snakes on a Plane. Warning, spoilers ahead. We open up to a beach scene where everyone seems to be having a great time. Then we cut over to a guy who's tearing down the scenic roads on his dirt bike, and he eventually stops underneath an overpass. As he drinks his Red Bull, a man is dropped over the edge, and he urges the guy to leave him here. The biker watches from the bushes as Eddie Kim pulls up and starts talking to the hanging man who turns out to be a prosecutor. Eddie beats the prosecutor with his bat, and the biker rushes to his dirt bike. As he races off, Eddie's guys shoot at him, but they miss. Eddie tells them to find him, and they leave the scene. Later, the biker watches the news from his room, but he doesn't know that someone is sneaking into his room. This biker kid just gets the random urge to check his door, and he finds 3 Asian guys waiting to bust in and tear him apart. That would terrify me to death. The biker kid sneaks to the balcony, and Neville pops up and warns him to be quiet if he wants to live. Neville takes out 2 of the guys that are breaking in, and he makes a break for his car. Neville introduces himself as FBI, and we find that the biker's name is Sean. Neville brings Sean into the police station, and he tries to convince Sean to testify against Eddie. Also, the only reason that Neville and the FBI even know that it was Sean who witnessed the murder is because he left his Red Bull can at the scene. Just another reason to never litter. Neville gives Sean some time to think, and we cut ahead to the airport as Claire and Tiffany are making their way to the plane they're working on. We also meet 3Gs as he signs some autographs, and Troy and Big Leroy stand around as part of his entourage. 3G says goodbye to his fans and tells his guys to make sure he's got enough hand sanitizer for the flight. When Claire gets to the plane, Ken and Grace surprise her and beg her not to quit her job since she wants to become a lawyer. Neville and Sean are waiting to board the plane as well, and they hop on with Neville's partner. On the plane, Claire gets the heads up that the FBI is taking over all the first-class seats, and the pilot tells her to tell the first-class passengers that they have to ride coach now. While the dogs sniff the plane, one of the airline workers gives someone the heads up that this is the plane the FBI are using. Back on the plane, Rick hits on Claire once he hops on board, and someone else is spraying Lay's with pheromones. Once in first class, Neville calls Harris at headquarters to see if he's heard anything about Eddie's whereabouts. But everything seems pretty quiet. Eventually, Gray starts doing the safety protocols over the intercom, and the plane finally takes off. Tiffany wastes no time in serving Sean his drinks, and Sean is taking in all of the attention. When Tiffany asks what Sean is doing with the FBI, he mentions Eddie Kim, and she tells him about a documentary she saw about a man who was tortured and killed for trying to testify against him. Sean lets her know that he's here to testify against him, and she thinks that's super hot. Some of the passengers are getting restless because of their own personal issues, but everything seems to be going quite well still. Neville decides to come downstairs to stretch his legs, and he runs into Claire, who isn't too happy about the FBI taking over first class. Back in coach, 3Gs takes the time to flirt with Mercedes, but he starts to question it when her dog starts getting in his face. Now we come to the main event. The reason we're all here. Snakes on a plane, people. I know it's a ridiculous premise, but if you really think about it, it would be terrifying to be stuck on a plane with big poisonous snakes for 5 hours. 2 of the passengers head to the lavatory to get it on, but little do they know that the snakes are loose. The couple removes the smoke detector so they can smoke a little reefer, but this leaves a hole that the snake comes out of and bites them. Grace and Ken are standing outside thinking that they're just getting it on, and they ignore the screams coming from inside. Some snakes bite some of the electrical wires, and some of the plane's functions go down. When another guy goes to the bathroom, he ends up getting bit on his little buddy, and he goes down. Slowly but surely, the snakes make their way around the plane, and it's clear that they're attracted to the pheromones that were sprayed on the Lays. Up in the cockpit, Claire comes up to see how long the turbulence will last, and she finds that the pilot is headed down to fix the avionics. This is what's really going on when they tell you to put your seatbelt on because of a little turbulence. Just kidding. The captain fixes the electronics, but he's attacked by a snake. So who goes down to help him? The co-pilot. What happens if he gets bit? Claire runs to get Neville and his partner, and they all head back to the cockpit. They check the captain and find out that he died of a heart attack, and they decide to keep going to LA. Suddenly, the oxygen masks come down, and the snakes come down with them. Panic erupts all over the plane, and Neville's partner goes to check on Coach. He makes it halfway down the stairs before finding the floor moving with snakes. Suddenly, the plane hits turbulence so bad that everyone gets sent flying, and Neville's partner is bitten in the chest. Neville rushes down to check on him, and he uses a taser to get the snakes away from him. Neville makes his way to the back of the plane, and he tells everyone to move to the front since there's no snakes there yet. I actually really love snakes, but this is still a nightmare. A stupid nightmare, but those are the worst kinds, aren't they? 3Gs wonders why Troy and Big Leroy weren't watching his back when it came to snakes on the plane, but they managed to get him to the front of the plane. Not before Big Leroy gets bit on his butt, though. Neville rushes to the front of the plane, and he tells everyone that they have to create a barrier between the front and the back of the plane. Everyone starts grabbing luggage and anything else that'll stack, but Mercedes and her dog are still in the back of the plane. Mercedes starts calling for help, and Chen Long comes to her aid. Up front, Claire tells Neville that there are 2 kids that need help, and they find the youngest one got bit before they made it to the front. When Grace looks over the barricade, she hears a baby crying, and she breaks down the wall to find it. The mother wakes up to find that her baby is missing, and she tells Grace to find it. She finds it all right. It's shaking a rattle in a rattlesnake's face. That baby's got balls of steel. Grace gets bit as she saves the baby, and they all rush up to the front. The wall is rebuilt, and everyone starts tending to their wounds. Neville carries his partner up to first class, and he opens his shirt to find that it might just be too late for him. Sure enough, he passes away right there. Downstairs, Claire mentions that there was supposed to be a doctor on board, and Tiffany informs her that he was killed during the initial attack. Meanwhile, Neville calls Harris to inform him of the attack, and Harris can't believe what he's hearing. He comes out to the other agents and he tells them that he needs a poisonous snake expert ASAP, as well as a strike team at LAX. Back on the plane, the mother finds the little boy who got bit, and she uses a home remedy to suck the poison out of his arm. I'm surprised every guy didn't cry out that he had a bite that he needed the poison sucked out of. Why didn't Big Leroy say anything? He got bit on the butt. Neville tells Sean to stay up top by the phone in case Harris calls, and he rushes back down to figure out a defense against the snakes. Claire tells him that all they've got are sporks, and she smashes a bottle to create a new option. Back on land, Harris goes to pick up Dr. Price, who's a venomous snake expert. The passengers on the plane are using fire extinguishers and makeshift weapons to defend themselves, and Sean comes down to tell Neville that Dr. Price is on the phone. Dr. Price tells him that snakes don't just bite, and there has to be something that's provoking the snakes. Dr. Price also tells him that he needs a list of snakes that are on the plane so that the right antivenom can be ready. And Neville tells him that he'll round up all of the dead snakes. An angry mob suddenly bursts up the stairs to see what's going on, and Neville gives them a basic rundown. That is the quickest I've ever seen an angry mob dissipate. No one argued with him at all. Are you serious? These are like the best passengers ever. Oh, and remember how I said they'd be screwed if Rick gets bit? Well, he did. Now the plane is going all topsy-turvy. Claire rushes to the cockpit and she almost gets bit herself too. Suddenly, the plane's nose starts to dive and everyone rushes to a seat. Claire battles a snake with a fire axe, and Neville gets there just in time to help pull the plane back up. Back in the cabin, Tiffany calls for help holding the barricade, and Sean comes down to try and help. The barricade falls apart anyways, and Sean tells her that they've got to go get everyone up to the second story. Now the snakes wreak havoc on the front of the plane, and everyone tries to jam themselves up the stairs. Just as the final people make their way up, a giant snake bursts out of the glass skylight. People start to panic and they fall over the side of the stairs. Now the giant snake is focused on them. The rude man grabs Mercedes' dog and yeets him down the aisle. I understand survival skills, but he just sat there yelling at everyone after he did it. The idiot obviously ends up getting eaten next. He had that coming though. Once everyone else is upstairs, Sean rallies everyone to barricade the stairs, and in the cockpit, Neville and Claire manage to pull the plane back up just before it almost falls into the ocean. Just when Claire grabs the radio to call the air traffic controller, Rick manages to stumble up into the cockpit, and she straps him in his seat as best as possible. Rick's arm is swollen from the poison, but he manages to activate the autopilot. He sends Neville and Claire back to first class to help however they can. Back on land, Dr. Price gets the pictures of the snakes, and he realizes that a lot of the snakes are not even from the continent. That means that there's absolutely no antivenom for some of the bites, and he has to come up with another solution. Everyone in first class is trying to hold it together, but if anyone knew that they don't have antivenom for a lot of them, I don't think they'd be doing this well. To make matters worse, the air is stopped, and that means that the air isn't recycling so they can breathe. Rick tells Neville that he'll have to reset it manually, and he prepares to head down. First, he has to deal with a little bit of panicking going on in first class, but in the process, 3Gs manages to snatch his gun. Troy tries to talk him down, and Neville manages to get his gun back. Just then, the lights shut off, and he heads up front again. Meanwhile, Claire and Tiffany check on Grace to find she's passed away. Claire goes to the stewardess area, and Neville takes a moment to console her. Claire makes him a homemade flamethrower, and she sends him down to the electrical area. She guides him over a radio. In first class, everyone tries to make nice, and 3Gs apologizes for pushing people and holding a gun on them. Again, in what world would a simple apology really be enough for something like that? No, there needs to be some sort of punishment here. I understand people do crazy things in moments of crisis, but we're all in this situation together. If I can hold it together, so can you. Meanwhile, Neville makes it to the luggage compartment, and he finds out that someone had the snake box rigged to open after they were a certain distance into their flight. He then turns his attention to the power lever and he bangs it back on. The lights and air come back on, but now, Neville has a rattlesnake to fend off. After falling into a box of Lay's, he manages to pierce the snake. Back on land, Dr. Price and Harris head out to intercept a black market snake dealer, and Harris quickly finds out that this guy is the one that Eddie bought the snakes from. They chase him around his farm, and after he gets shot, he gets bit by one of his own snakes too. Harris takes this time to get his answers, and a snake dealer gives him a list of the snakes and explains how they use pheromones to make them aggressive. Seriously? People don't cooperate like this in real life. They're stubborn. Back on the plane, Neville makes it back to first class, and he gets the call that they have the anti-venom ready. Tiffany goes to the cockpit to tell Rick the good news, but the door is locked. When Neville jimmies the door open, he finds Rick dead and snakes all over the cockpit. They rush back to the passengers to see if anyone can fly, and Troy admits that he's got over 2,000 hours towards a pilot license. Now all they have to do is get rid of the snakes in the cockpit, and Neville has an idea. He has everyone strap themselves in, and he plans to flush the snakes out. He shoots the window open, and the pressure in the cabin starts tearing everything out. Troy opens the cockpit door and clears the room before making his way to the pilot chair. As Troy tries to pilot the plane, the hole in the plane rips wider, and passengers start to get pulled closer to it. I'd never fly again. This is like every possible fear for anyone who hates flying. To top it off, when Troy talks to traffic control, he admits that his 2,000 hours of experience are from a video game. And I'd say that would be the end of all hope. I'm a gamer myself, but no matter how many hours on Rocket League I got, I wouldn't start driving into giant soccer balls to save people. Troy and Neville manage to touch down on the runway, but they're coming in too fast. Just at the last second, Troy manages to turn the plane to come in for a semi-smooth landing, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. Neville even praises the PlayStation for giving Troy the skills to land this giant plane. Everyone celebrates the successful landing, and emergency services pull up outside. As everyone slides out of the plane, they manage to match the anti-venom to each bite victim, and Neville takes a moment to thank Sean for everything he's done. Suddenly, a snake strikes Sean, and Neville shoots him. Luckily, Sean was wearing a bulletproof vest, and everything's okay. But hold on, this is from a day and age where a romantic interest is necessary, and Neville shoots his shot with Claire. Of course, it works out, but this is a double romance feature. Tiffany writes her number down for Sean, and the good guys win. At least that's what we're supposed to gather from Sean taking Neville surfing. Although Neville looks like he was doing a better job on the plane full of snakes. Then, the credits roll. This movie's been a joke for almost 2 decades. But you've got to admit, it's entertaining. After a string of movies that weren't the best, this was a breath of fresh air. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.